Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NAFCC Application webinar. My name is Marissa Gallegos. I know that it says Alicia Platt on the screen. She presented it at the last time, but Marissa Gallegos, me, will actually be presenting tonight. This webinar is part 2 of our accreditation series. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. Before we get started, for those of you who are attending a webinar for the first time, just know that on your screen you should have a little question box. So during the webinar, if you have any questions, you are welcome to type in your question and I will answer it as quickly as I can. This webinar does have a lot of information in it, so it might sound like I'm going through it quickly. It's just because I have lots of information to cover in this short hour. So I hope to get through all of it, and then of course if you have questions, go ahead and write them down. Just to make sure that everyone can hear me and see the screen, and just so you guys can practice using the question box, go ahead and write in your name and where you're from and submit it as a question. That way I can know that you guys can see and hear me okay. Hi Alexis, hi Sonia, hi Sarah. Hi Sabrina, it's good to see a lot of you. A lot of familiar faces, so that's great. Thank you for coming back to these webinars. We really hope that they're helpful as you're working through your accreditation. So I do want to go ahead and get started right away. Welcome Yamilka, Shante, Roma, Tanya. Thanks for all coming back. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of information to cover tonight. And then, of course, if you have questions, go ahead and feel free to write them in the question box. Alrighty, so I want to go ahead and get started with this question. Why do you want to become accredited? Whether you're attending this webinar as a candidate in process working on your self-study, as a previously or currently accredited provider wanting to re-accredit, or as someone who hasn't even started and is just interested in learning more about the process, take a moment to think about and write down why accreditation is interesting or intriguing to you. I'll give you a moment to think about this and then write it down if you happen to have a piece of paper or you want to grab your phone, just to write down why it is that you want to become accredited, or why did you want to become accredited if you're already accredited. So just take a moment to think about that and write down your answer. Alrighty, thank you for taking a moment to do that. The reason I wanted you to write it down is because keeping track of what you are thinking and feeling is often meaningful when reflecting back on your accreditation journey. It is also helpful to look back on the reason for why you want to become accredited when you need help when you're on this path, because sometimes it can get hard, sometimes it gets stressful, and we know that accreditation is a mark of excellence, and excellence is always translated into hard work, and hard work isn't always fun. It isn't always easy. We know that sometimes it can be stressful. So the goal for this webinar is so that you can walk away feeling a little less stressed and a little bit more confident about this phase of the accreditation process. Makisha shares that it's something that she's always wanted to do. That's awesome, Makisha. Thank you for sharing that. Shante, yes, if you guys want to share your responses, you can go ahead and type it in the question box and I'll read them out. It might be nice to hear about your reasonings for wanting to become accredited, but it's mostly to have personally for you. That way you can reflect on it, and when you're having a bad day, when your kids have thrown milk and cookies all over and colored on the walls, and you know, when you have one of those nightmare days, you can look back on why it is that you want to become accredited, why are you doing family child care, and you can read that answer and feel more confident about continuing forward with accreditation. Shante says she's just wanting to be a little bit more serious and seeing it as a business. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Sonia says, my parents appreciate my providing a high quality child care in the community. Perfect. So yes, please hold on to those notes that you write down about why you want to become accredited so you can reflect on them. So tonight we will go step by step through the NAFCC Accreditation Application. We'll go through each page of it so you understand all the nitty-gritty details of that. Yamika says she likes to provide a better service to her children and community as well. Perfect. So I want to go ahead and quickly start with a brief review of the whole accreditation process as a whole so you can see where the application lies and how it will help you along your accreditation path. NAFCC's accreditation is designed to be a continuum of professional development and quality improvement. It's designed to support your efforts in being accredited rather than getting accredited. The steps of NAFCC accreditation include, let me grab my little pen here, include self-study enrollment, the application, observation, decision, updates, and eventual reaccreditation. So the first step is self-study enrollment. During self-study, providers evaluate themselves and their programs using the quality standards for NAFCC accreditation, make quality improvements, and gather required documentation for the application. The second phase is the actual application. When candidates believe that they have reached their professional development goals and have made the necessary quality improvements to their programs, they commit to completing accreditation by submitting an accreditation application. At the time you submit an application, the members of the NAFCC accreditation team will assess your eligibility based on what you have submitted. I had a couple other responses come in. Kathy says that she wants to become accredited because it raises the bar on high quality childcare. Hi Rosetta, thanks for joining us. Okay, step 3 is the observation. NAFCC trained observers conduct an on-site observation of candidates and their programs. The observer gathers information based on the quality standards and objectively documents what is observed. Step 4 is the actual decision. NAFCC will review the documentation after you, the candidate, have turned in your paperwork, as well as the observer after you have your observation visit. And they will also view the data that they have received from parent surveys. And with all that information, they determine the candidate's accreditation status. At this point, if you've passed the observation phase, you become accredited for a period of 3 years. So this phase is the most anticipated because then you'll know whether you become accredited or not. After you become accredited, that's not where the process stops. There is a few more steps to go. The next one during your accreditation is completing an update. The update offers a way for accredited providers to update us here at NAFCC about your programs during your 3-year accreditation period. The update will verify that you continue to meet all the eligibility requirements, and you'll report back in a professional development report and a quality improvement report about the things that you've been doing during the past year or 18 months. If you turn in an update, you will not have to do self-study again. However, if you miss the deadlines for your update, you will have to do self-study again. So sometimes people get confused and think they have to go back here to the first step in order to get back to the application. But as long as you do your update, you can skip self-study again, because basically the update is like a mini self-study and just having your review and telling us what you've been doing. And then you can just go skip straight to re-accreditation, which is family child care providers. You, as a provider, showing your ongoing commitment to the profession of family child care by becoming accredited for another 3-year period. Accredited providers who maintain their accreditation status as long as they're actively providing care validate that high quality family child care is a legitimate child care option, and that family child care is essential to children, parents, and communities. So a lot of you mentioned that you wanted to become accredited, or you are accredited because you like to have a high quality program. You want to show people that you're serious about what you're doing. So becoming accredited and then even reapplying 2, 3, 4, 5 times shows just how committed you are to quality. And we even have providers who've been, I think the highest we've had is, I think I have a provider that's been reaccredited 6 times. So you can become as reaccredited as many times as you want, as long as you're doing family child care. There's my notes here. So let's jump into talking about the actual application now. So the first question you want to ask yourself is when you should submit your application. Firstly, before submitting, make sure that you feel ready. Review your quality standards, whether you're in self-study or not, and make sure that you're feeling comfortable with them and that you're implementing all of them before submitting an application. If you submit an application before you're ready and the observer comes, it'll be very obvious that you're not ready, and then you'll have to do the whole process over again. So really make sure that you're feeling comfortable and ready before you submit your application, because when you submit your application, that tells us here at NAFCC that you're ready for someone to come out to your home. Second, first-time candidates and reaccrediting providers should submit the application according to the month that they would like the visit to take place. It's really important to plan your submission of your application based on the best time to have your observation visit. So for example, let me grab my pen again. For example, if you submit, okay, let's say we're in December right now. So let's decide you want to turn your application in tomorrow. So if you submit your application tomorrow, December 6th, you can expect to have your observation take place in March or April. So you can see that it's a few months away because we have to review your application, we have to find an observer who lives near you, who can go to your home, and that takes a couple months to organize. So let's say you live in, I don't know, Montana. I know Montana gets like crazy snow in the winter months, like January, February, March. So maybe you would want to hold off and not submit in December because you don't want to risk that an observer can't come because there's too much snow. I don't know. Or maybe you want to submit in March, but if you submit in March, then an observation would take place in June or July, and you don't have your program open in the summer. So just some things to consider when you submit your application is to check this calendar or this chart to make sure that you know approximately when your observation will take place. This calendar, this chart is available on our website for further review. So yeah, just a good tip is to make sure that you review this before you submit your application so you can kind of get an idea of when we'll be coming by. So here's my suggestion if you're a re-accrediting provider. Make sure that you plan your observation visit to be before your accreditation expiration date. We have a lot of providers use the expiration date as an application submission date, but then they later have problems with their state funding. There are several states that will fund you to be accredited, or that you get special benefits because you're accredited, and you lose those benefits if you're tardy in submitting your application, or if you submit your application on the expiration date, because that expiration date means you're not accredited anymore. So you'll technically be a candidate in process again. You'll be in process because we're processing your paperwork, but you won't be able to receive the benefits from your state. So for example, if you have an accreditation that expires July of 2020, you really want to submit no later than February, because if we go back to our chart, February, your visit would be taking place in May or June. So that would give you at least a month of wiggle room before your expiration date in July, because you can have your observation date maybe in May or even the latest June. It takes a month for our team to score it, and then you'd have your score by July when it's just before your accreditation expires. So I always tell re-accrediting providers to go ahead and try to submit your application as early as 5 or 6 months in advance, so you don't lose your benefits for being accredited, and so you don't worry about losing your status. Are there any questions before I move on about when to submit an application, whether you are doing it for the first time or are re-accrediting? Okay, awesome. I'll continue on, but if you have your questions, go ahead and feel free to write them down and I will get to them. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the application. We'll go through each page together, and if at any point during the rest of the presentation, if you have a question on one of these pages, feel free to let me know. Because this webinar does have a lot of content, I might not be able to answer all of your questions, but I really do my very best to answer all of them as soon as I receive them. So let's go ahead and get started. There is an important note on this first page. A lot of people skip the first page just because, I don't know, because it's the first page and it doesn't look like there's anything you really have to do, but this has a lot of good information. So please note that to apply for accreditation, providers must be enrolled in self-study or be a re-accrediting provider. So if you haven't done self-study before, you have to do that first. If you are an accredited provider already and you want to re-accredit it, you must do your updates first. You can't skip those parts of the process. You have to do that before you can submit an application or before you can submit an application for re-accreditation. So make sure that you've got those lined up and ready to go before you submit your application. So the next most important part of this first page is that it's going to tell you the eligibility criteria that you need, and it's going to tell you all the requirements of everything that you need to submit with your application. So I really like that this first page has checkboxes, because as long as you can check all the boxes, then that's how you know you're ready to submit your application. So there are a lot of eligibility criteria. Some of the most frequently asked about or frequently missed ones are making sure, one, that you have that you as a provider are caring for a minimum of 3 children in your home, and that one of those children can't be one of your own children. You as the primary caregiver need to spend at least 80% of the operating hours time actively being involved with children, and that if you have a co-provider, they have to spend at least 60% of the time with them, and then make sure that you're meeting the highest level of regulation for your regulatory body or for your state. But most providers don't have any issues meeting the eligibility criteria. Next are the application requirements. With the application requirements, there is paperwork, fees, training hours, CPR, first aid, health, TB, for yourself, for your assistants, for your substitutes, federal background checks, for you, yourself, your substitutes, your assistants, but we'll go through each of those, each one by one, so you understand all the nitty-gritty of that. This is just a great way to get a summary of everything. So Roma says, so true, because I waited until expired date, so my level of benefits went down until I received the certificate again. Yes, so unfortunately you learned by bad experience, but yes, so always submit if you're reaccrediting again, submit it 5 or 6 months before your accreditation expiration date. That way you don't run into that problem again. And I always feel really bad when providers tell me that. And yeah, because there's nothing we can do other than just try to process your paperwork as fast as we can, but it does take a few months for us to get everything done. Alrighty, so on the next page of the application, this is just basic information. It just helps us to verify that both your contact and eligibility information is up to date and that things are looking good. Make sure that if you have a business name, that you write that down. Make sure that your address is correct. We had an issue the other day that someone gave us the wrong address and then the observer went out and couldn't find the provider. So make sure that that's correct. Let us know what language you need so we get you the correct observer out to your home and that we're giving you the correct language materials. But yeah, I think those are the main ones where we have issues. So make sure that you have those. And then make sure also that when you write your business name down, that is the same business name that you have on your child care license. That's really important. Okay, let me erase this. So please make sure to fill out this licensing consent form so we're able to request permission to look at your records if necessary. A lot of states, we can now access the information online if we need it to look at your licensing reports and see if you have any issues with your state licensing, but there are some states that still we have to have this licensing agreement. So please make sure that you sign this, whether you think you need it or not, just please sign it. So that gives us permission to talk to a representative of your state if we need to, because sometimes they won't let us have your information if we don't have this letter, and then that delays your process. Oh, hi Anime, thanks for joining us. Roma asks, what if I just want to do weekend military care? Will an observer be able to come out, or must you have kids during the week? Let me go back. There is one of the things that says how many hours. I don't remember if it's here. Here we go. Provide care to children for a minimum of 15 hours per week. So if you're taking care of those children, Roma, for at least 15 hours a week during that weekend care, then yes, you could still become accredited. Just make sure that you meet that 15 hours per week. That's a good question. I know that the military has varying needs, so sometimes, yeah, there are exceptions to how you do your child care there. Maybe we're just marking. Alrighty, did I skip a page? Oh no, we're on the right page. Okay, so this next page, page 4, you will note any other adults living in your home, any assistants you might have, and any substitutes. If you're unaware of what a substitute is or what an assistant is, you can do the quality standards 5.3 through 5.42, and that gives you a lot of good detailed information on what an assistant is and what a substitute is. This will tell you what you need to submit. So for an assistant, you'll need to submit first aid, CPR, health screening, TB screening, and state and federal background checks. If you have a substitute for quality standards, you need to also have those same things, but for the purposes of the application, we just will be checking their state and federal background checks. And then if you have an adult living in your home that's over the age of 18, they will need state and federal background checks. Are there any questions about assistants, adults, or substitutes. If you don't have a substitute, if you don't have assistant, you can skip this page. Okay, so the next page is about co-providers. A co-provider is someone who is becoming accredited with you, where you both spend at least 60% of the time in your program. They must meet all the same requirements as an accrediting provider, including submitting training documentation. This page will help us to verify eligibility information for your co-provider. It's similar to the first page that you as a provider fill out, because basically a co-provider is the same as a regular provider. If you don't have a co-provider, you can skip this page. The next page, page 6, is where you will fill out info regarding operating hours and employee schedules. This is really important to fill out because it will help us and an observer determine a good day and time to come out and observe your home. This page concerns those that are regularly in the home that may or may not have interaction with the program, such as family members or specialists that you might have. This information is also helpful and useful to the observer, so they know what to expect when they come out to your home. Again, if you don't have anyone that regularly comes into your home, you can skip this page, but if you do, you want to make sure to write that information down. And then the next page is just any additional information, if there's anything that you think that NAFCC or your observer should know about your program or about you, or about someone in your home, go ahead and write that information down here. Roma says the pages we can skip, do we still need to send them in blank? Yes, send them in blank. It just is a lot easier for Fernanda, who reviews the pages, to make sure, because she'll look through the numbers too and see that all the pages are there or not there, and then if there's a page missing, she'll have to go look and see which page is missing. So yeah, even if you don't submit, if you don't write anything on the page, go ahead and submit it just so we can see that we have all the pages and that it's just blank because you don't have it. Because if you don't submit it in, then we start to think, oh, well, maybe they do have somebody and it didn't get faxed over correctly or didn't get emailed over to us. So that's a good question. Yes, go ahead and still submit them blank so we know that they really are indeed blank. This is where you'll record enrollment information. So remember to include children's birthdays, the days and hours that they attend the program. This is really important so an observer can select a day where the majority of the children are in attendance, because an observer can't come out to your home if there's less than 3 children there that day. They're not allowed to do the observation. So you'll have to put all the information down. They'll read the hours and times they're there, so then they'll pick a day where you have the most children on that day. If you happen to have a change in enrollment between the time you submit your application and your observation, you'll want to submit that information to us. Just get a copy of the same page and resend it to us either by email or fax to keep us updated, so then we can let the observer know of any changes. So if they need to modify their plans to come a different day, they'll know about that and do that. Sarah Neal says, if your home is separated into 2 sections, how does the observer observe? For example, I have infants and toddlers, main level, preschool in the basement. So that is a great thing to write about in this additional information page. You'll want to mention that's how you have your program laid out. And then either, I don't know how they would choose to do that. They might send out 2 observers, or I don't know. I don't know if I personally don't deal with the assigning of observers, so I'm not sure exactly all the technical work behind how Shireen picks the observers and all that information and how they determine who and how many go. But that would be super important, Sarah, to go ahead and write in your additional information so that they know that, and then Shireen, who does the observation plans, can get that ready for you. You're welcome. And then this next page is just more of the same. So if you ran out of space on this first page, you've got more room on this next page. Okay, and then this page, page 11, will just ask for some more information that will help the observer to know what to expect in the setting of your program. There's space to mention if you live on a military base or gated community with special access instructions, or if you have special parking considerations, or if your house is just really hard to find and you need to put some directions there. This is just any extra little tidbit to help them find your home. Roma says, what if you do a lot of drop-ins and one child is present that day? That's a good question. So if you know, let's say that your observation is this month and you're waiting for your observer, and I don't know, tomorrow comes along and only one child shows up, you would want to call NAFCC, call the main office and let us know, hey, my observer could come today, but I only have one child. You want to call and let us know right away, so then we can call your observer and let them know, hey, this is a bad day because they only have one child enrolled. So it's your responsibility to let us know if it's a bad day during your observation month so we can let the observer know. That's a great question. And then this next page is very important because you are you're agreeing to submitting the application. You're agreeing to pay all the fees, have all the requirements, agree to have your information in the accredited provider search. In this certification, you also agree to follow the NAEYC Code of Ethical Conduct, which is this. We don't include this page in the application, but it can be found on NAEYC's website or by simply Googling NAEYC Code of Ethical Conduct. This code talks about being ethical and respectful in your interactions and practices with parents, agencies, organizations, and businesses you work with, and especially for the children that are in your care. So you want to make sure that you read this over and check all these boxes and sign that you're willing to be certified and do all these things. And this is really important, so make sure that you read through the thing you're actually signing about, because I know that some people just check boxes to get it done, but no, this is all really important. Make sure you review those things that you're checking off. Sonia is asking for what is the re-accreditation fee? That is in just 2 more slides, so give me just 2 minutes and I will get to that question. This next page, let me erase my drawings. This next page is just a survey for research information. Fill that out. This helps us to make decisions about NAFCC processes and information that could better serve you. Helps us to know what to, how to serve you better, basically. So next page, Sonia, this will answer your question. So here is the payment information. So whether you are accrediting or re-accrediting, the application fee is $525, and that is if you are a member. So you want to make sure that if your membership is expired by the time you are submitting an application, that you also pay a $45 membership fee. Otherwise, you have to pay $735 for your application, which ends up being a lot more than these two. So much better to be a member, get membership benefits, and then also get the application at the lower price. And then if you have a co-provider, then you also have to pay the $100 co-provider fee. This page, you can go ahead and leave credit card information here, or if you don't want to leave your credit card information on the application itself, after you submit your application, you can give our office a call, or you can send a check to our office. Did I answer your question, Sonia? Okay, perfect. Yeah, this page is pretty self-explanatory. We have our address and our phone numbers and emails on there. So if you need to contact us about payment, it's all there. So if in the case you submit your application 1 to 60 days late, meaning after your accreditation expiration date, you will have to pay a $50 late fee. A $100 late fee is charged for re-accreditation submissions that are 61 days to 6 months late. When you pay this fee, please note that it does not extend the life of your accreditation. You're simply paying for being tardy. We'll still happily help you with your application, but you will still be expired. If you end up placing yourself in this position, we do consider you to be a provider in good standing because we know that you've been accredited before and that you do the hard work to be accredited. But technically, on the records of NAFCC and on state records, you are technically not accredited until a decision is made about your new accreditation after your observation visit. So this often happens a lot too, that the that a re-accrediting provider, life just happens, they forget about their expiration date, and they submit one, they check and they say, oh, my expiration date is really close, but it's okay, I'll just wait and then pay the $50 late fee and I'll still be accredited. That's not how it works. You do have to submit all your things, and we do have to go through the whole process before you're technically accredited again. So $50 late fee, 1 to 60 days late, $100 late fee if you're 61 to 6 months late. If you're later than 6 months, you have to do self-study all over again. So try to avoid that. Know your expiration date. I got some questions coming in. Sarah asks, as the provider, each additional co-provider needs to be paid for? Yes, typically you'll only have one co-provider, but because you are, yes, you have your home separated in 2 sections, you may have more co-providers. But yes, each additional co-provider would need to pay the $100 because they are doing all the same requisites as you that we'll be talking about in just a second, but they'll have to submit all the same information, training hours, CPR, first aid, all that good stuff, the same as you. So yes, each of them have to pay $100. But just remember and make sure that you understand the difference between a co-provider and an assistant, because it may be that you have an assistant, Sarah, and not a co-provider. So just double check and make sure that. Roma asks, if I lapse in membership and reapply, do I need a new number or still have the old number? So for each membership that you get, you'll get a new membership number. So you don't have to worry too much about keeping those numbers, because with each membership you'll get a new number, but your accreditation number will stay the same for the accreditation that you're on. But when you become reaccredited, you get a new reaccreditation number. So don't worry too much about numbers. Just make sure that your membership is up to date, and if it does lapse, just give us a call and we'll get you straightened away and get you your new membership. Kathy Pugh asks, what is a co-provider? Let's go back a couple slides. Maybe more than a couple slides. Oh, here we go. So a co-provider is basically the same as a regular provider. You as a provider, the co-provider is going to do the same exact things. They would have to submit all the same paperwork as you, meaning the health assessment, TB screening, CPR, first aid, and your background checks and training hours. They're with you, and you and your co-provider are in the program at least 60% of the time. So a co-provider, they are also wanting to be accredited with you, Kathy. So if you just have an assistant there who helps you a lot of the time but doesn't want to be accredited, they would just be considered an assistant because they don't want to do all the training hours maybe, or they don't spend as much time in the program as you, so they would just be considered an assistant. A co-provider is going the whole 10 miles with you to become accredited. Does that make sense? Does that clarify a little bit what that is? And then an assistant is someone who's at least 16 years old who works under your supervision as the provider. Stacy asks, the assistant will not need to pay registration if I still want to be accredited. Correct, Stacy. So only you are paying for your $525 fee to become accredited, but you do have to include the information, this information that's listed here for your assistant in order to become accredited you yourself. But no, your assistant will not have to pay anything. You don't need to pay anything for your assistant. All great questions. Okay, let's go back to where we were, unless there are any other questions on that. Okay, perfect. So we've covered all of the eligibility criteria and we've covered all of the pages of the application. Now we're gonna go, let me get my pen right here. So yes, we went through the whole application and we talked about the application fee and we talked about membership. We talked about providers and co-providers. So now we're gonna talk about the rest of this stuff that you need to include along with your application. So the first of those are the health assessment and the TB screening. So health assessments and TB screenings must be no older than 2 years old. It's very important that you submit these because it helps us to know whether or not your healthcare physician deems you healthy and able to take care of children. And that's the reason why NAFCC requires that you submit these every 2 years, that they're no older than 2 years old. So you can choose to use these two forms that we provide, or if your doctor provides a different form, you can submit that form as well. Just make sure that they answers the question if you are cleared to work with children, or if you're not cleared to work with children, and then making sure that you have a negative test, or that you are free of any symptoms if you've had it before. Are there any questions on health or TB screenings? Awesome, okay. The next form of documentation that you'll want to include with your application is CPR and first aid. Same as health and TB screenings, these need to be redone every 2 years, so make sure that when you submit that your CPR and first aid is no older than 2 years. In most states, you get them done every year or 2 years anyway, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Sarah's asking, my preschool teacher is not my co-provider, however, she's overly qualified, etc. Is there a way she could be accredited with me, maybe under my family child care name? Yes. So, well, if she works under you in your program, and it's going to be her decision really. If she wants to become accredited, then yes, she could be accredited with you. And what would happen is you would submit the application as normal, pay the co-provider fee. You and her would submit all of your training and all these documents I'm talking about right now. And then what happens is when we have an observer come out, the observer would be watching both you and her. Or if you're split up different levels, they might send out 2 observers, one to watch her and one to watch you. And then you would both become accredited if you both pass that observation visit. But if she doesn't want to become accredited, then she would just be technically considered your assistant, but you in your heart know that she's equally as qualified as you. It just wouldn't have the NAFCC accreditation title. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that answered your question. Roma says, any recommendations besides your personal healthcare provider to get this done? I always have a difficult time. They don't want to use that form, and they don't deem it as a sports physical. So you're not the only one that has that problem, Roma. I know, and the only other recommendation that I've given to providers that their doctors just don't want to do it, or they have a hard time to get to see their doctor, is there are community centers that you can go to and just get a quick exam, and they'll sign that for you, just to get a quick physical from a community center or from a community health, just a community health center. Yep, Roma, that's a great idea. Go to the Minute Clinic at Walgreens. Yeah, there's other quick options if your doctor doesn't want to do that paperwork. I'm sorry if they don't want to do that. That's not nice. But no, you're not the only one that has that problem. Other providers have told me that same issue. Devine says, in my state, licensing uses a different health form. Are you saying that you will accept their form? Yes. If your state uses a different health form, you're more than welcome to use that form and submit that form. Just make sure it's not older than 2 years old, and that it says clearly somewhere that you're qualified and healthy enough to watch children. Unfortunately, none of us here are nurses or doctors, so we can't read difficult medical forms if you send us a full-on physical. So that's why we need something that says very clearly from your doctor that you are A-okay to be in the care of children. Okay, so along with your TB screening, health exam, and your CPR first aid, you do need to submit a state and federal background check. And state and federal background checks must be done every 3 years. So make sure that your federal background check is no older than 3 years. Now, there are some little exceptions. There are some states that they do them every 5 years, and they're on a wrap-back system. And so there are some states that have a little bit of exception, but for most states, most all states, you do have to submit a state federal background check every 3 years. So make sure that when you submit one in, that it's no older than 3 years old. And if you think you might be an exception, you can send us an email, and which I'll provide at the end of the webinar, and you can ask about your personal situation. I don't have all the states memorized, So if you ask me right now, I might not be able to tell you, but I do have a cheat sheet that I keep here in the office for when we need to know all the state and federal background rules, because every state is different and it gets really confusing. But just know basic rule every 3 years. So make sure it's no older than 3 years old. Oops, skipped page. Kathy says Pennsylvania is 5 years. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head if Pennsylvania is one of those weird ones where they do the wrap back and they inform us if you're naughty or whatever, but I think it is. So yeah, if you think you're an exception, you can always email me and then I can double check my cheat sheet. Alrighty, so we've talked about those last pieces of documentation that you need to submit. Now the next big part of your accreditation submission, which is what stresses the most people out and which we'll spend a lot of time in the rest of the webinar on, is training. The amount of training you need to submit depends on whether or not is your first time accrediting or if you're a re-accrediting provider. If this is your first time, you will need to submit a total of 120 training hours. In those 120 hours, they must include at least 12 hours of at least 5 of the core competencies, which we'll talk about in just a second in the next slide. If you're re-accrediting, you will need to submit only 90 hours, but you must ensure that at least 45 of those 90 hours are from CEUs, meaning continuing education units, college courses, or completed degrees. We'll also talk about that in length, because I know that's a very popular question. For re-accrediting providers, you must also have a mix of the 7 core competencies. In the following slides, we'll cover all the types of training that we accept for you to total up those 120 or those 90 hours. Whether you're a first-time accreditor or a re-accrediting provider, you must ensure that all education training, with degrees being an exception, are completed within 3 years prior to submitting your accreditation application. So if you submit your application today, we're at December 2019, you can submit anything from December 2016 and forward, unless of course it's a degree, then it can be older than 3 years. So let's go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of training. So for the first time accreditors, in your 120 training hours that you submit, you must include at least 12 hours of at least 5 of these core competencies. For re-accrediting providers, you must include training in all 7. And the competencies that we look for are relationships, interactions, and guidance, child growth and development, learning environments and curriculum, health, safety, nutrition, assessment and screening, special needs and inclusion, and professional and business practices. This requirement ensures that all accredited providers have a good balance in what they choose to study in either their 120 hours or their 90 hours. Like I just said, it's just to make sure that you're not only studying about health or that you're not only studying about relationships. So this is not a requirement that I think you need to stress out too much about. Just make sure that when you're going to get training that you don't find yourself in the trend of always going to one competency, that you're trying to be balanced and learn about lots of different things. Roma says CSUs cost money. Oh, see, I think you're trying to say CEUs. CEUs cost money for that certificate here in Georgia. Yeah, for CEU hours, they typically and usually will cost a little bit more money, but we'll talk about that just a minute when we come to CEUs. And then Sarah says, are these hours you may already have or new? So these hours that I'm going to talk about, they can be no older than 3 years old. So any trainings that you've taken in the past 3 years, you can go ahead and submit towards your application, unless it's a degree. So if you have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or master's degree, it can be older than 3 years. But we'll get to that in just a minute as well. Okay, Kathy says she needs clarity about the degrees, okay, and versus training. So we'll get to that. Right now, if you want to hold your questions for a moment, because I'll get to all the questions that I know you have, and then once I kind of cover all the different types of training, I think I'll end up answering a lot of your questions, and then once we get to the end of this little training session, then you can ask all your questions. I think I'm going to answer a lot of your questions that are coming up. So first part of training, make sure you got a good mix. If you're re-accrediting, at least 5 of them. If you're accrediting for the first time, at least 5 of them. If you're re-accrediting, you need all of them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the types of trainings you can submit in. Trainings that are 2 hours long or less. That's pretty self-explanatory. You're allowed to submit up to 28 hours of any training that has lasted the amount of 2 hours or shorter. For example, if you took a workshop about nutrition from your state, they gave you a certificate, you can count that towards your 120 hours or your 90 training hours for if you're re-accrediting. Trainings that are over 2 hours, self-explanatory again. If you take a class or a training or a workshop that was over 2 hours and they give you a certificate or some proof of attendance, you can use that towards your 120 training hours or your 90 training hours. And we accept an unlimited number of these types of hours. The reason that we only accept up to 28 hours of the shorter training is because we want to make sure that you're getting good high quality training, that you're not just going to the 1 hour or half hour workshops that your neighbor is giving down the road or whatever. Make sure that the trainings you're getting are good, long trainings that are worth going to. So that's why we have the limit on there. If you have taught any trainings, first-time re-accrediting providers can also submit trainings that you yourself have taught. We limit these to 18 hours, and you can only submit each class you teach once. But if you want to submit some of these hours, that's a great way that you can get training hours too. So if you do choose to submit a training that you yourself have taught, just make sure that you submit a description of the class you taught with the date and time you taught it, and then some sort of proof that someone attended the class, such as a sign-in sheet. We do encourage re-accrediting providers to seek opportunities to deliver trainings, though it's not required. So this is a great way for you yourself to help other providers and to also help yourself and get those training hours. Okay, degrees. So the next 3 slides that I'll be showing you are going to cover the question that some of you might have about CEU hours and how to get those 45 CEU hours if you are a re-accrediting provider. So you can submit a master's, a bachelor's, associate's related degrees, or a bachelor's unrelated degrees for a certain amount of hours. Let me grab my pen here. If you are a first-time accredited provider, this is what your hours will total to. If you are a re-accrediting provider, this is what the amount of hours you can receive. The reason it changes is because we do it by percentage. So for a master's related degree, if you submit a master's related degree, we will count 45%, that will count for up to 45% of your training hours. So 45% of 120 is 54, 45% of 90 hours is 40.5 hours. Bachelor's related degrees count up for 35%. Associates is 25%. And bachelor's unrelated is 15%. So those percentages equal out these numbers. So if you're first-time accredited provider and you want to submit a master's related degree, meaning in child education, child early education, you will get 54 hours towards your training total. Bachelor's 42 hours, associates 30 hours, and then a bachelor's unrelated, that just means like if you took a degree in accounting or something that's not related to early child care, we will still count that up to 18 hours. If you're re-accrediting, 40.5 hours for a master's, 31.5 for a bachelor's, 22.5 for an associate's, and 13.5 for a bachelor's unrelated. You'll want to submit a copy of your transcript. They don't need to be an official copy. It can be an unofficial copy, but we need to have that transcript so then we can see that you did indeed complete your degree, and those count towards your CEU hour total if you're a re-accrediting provider. Okay, got a couple questions. Sarah asks, I took my 45 hours child development and 90-hour preschool in 2013. Does that mean I will need to retake the classes? Because in Maryland, as long as you've taken them, they're not required to be renewed after a certain time frame. So yes, Sarah, you would need to find new training hours because we at NAFCC will only count training hours that are younger than 3 years old. So that's why, and the reason that we have it that you need to submit training that's less than 3 years is because child education changes a lot. We get new research every year, and so new classes are continually coming out. We want you to be trained on the most up-to-date information. We really don't want to be mean about it. It's just because we want you to be, it's a national accreditation that you're receiving. You have to be knowledgeable about the most recent family child care trends and what's going on in early child care development and education. So that's awesome that you took that many hours, but yes, you would need to find some more training hours that are less than 3 years old. Anna May asks, I just completed student teaching 12 weeks for 5.5 hours per day for a K-4 certification in Pennsylvania. Does this count towards training? Sure, yeah. If you can get a certificate from that, or if you got a letter stating that you had that student teaching because it is child care related, then yeah, you could totally count that. Just make sure you have proof that you did it. Kathy asks, are these webinars counted? Yes, they do. So at the end of each webinar that you attended with NAFCC, whether it's a professional development webinar or an accreditation webinar, you can count it as hours. They do not count, well, it depends. Sometimes they count as CEU hours, sometimes they don't. Most of the professional development webinars that NAFCC offers will count towards CEU hours. Currently, these accreditation webinars, so like this webinar, it doesn't count towards a CEU hour. We're still trying to get them approved by Auburn University to be CEU, to be able to receive CEUs for them. We haven't received that permission yet, so these are just regular training hours. But yes, these trainings that you take through NAFCC, you get a certificate the next day and you can count them towards training hours. Stacy asked, how are college credits calculated for CEUs? That's the next slide. College courses. Oh, let me delete all my scribbles. So college courses. If you are taking a semester course, each credit in your semester course is worth 15 hours of training. So if you take a 3-unit class, you would get 45 training hours, which is awesome. So if you're ever wanting to get a lot of hours in a short amount of time, going to the community college or working on your degree is a really good way to get quick hours and CEU hours. Obviously, it's a lot of work to go back to school or to take a class, especially with your busy schedules, but that's a great way that you can get lots of hours really fast. If you take a quarter class, then each unit is only worth 10 hours. So if you take a 3-unit class, it's 30 hours. And then the same with your degree, just submit a copy of your transcript with the grade that you got. You have to complete the class before we can count the hours. But yes, once you've completed the class and you got your grade, you can submit your transcript and then we can count that towards CEU hours. Shante says, I didn't get my certificate from yesterday. I can check on that, Shante. I know that sometimes they go out a little bit late the next day. So after this webinar, check to see if you got it. And then if not, send me an email and then I'll make sure I get your certificate out. And then you also ask, I have my CDA, would this be counted? That's the next slide. I think it's actually in 2 slides, but I'll skip it so I can get to your question. CDA, yes. If you have a initial CDA, which is the Family Child Care Child Development Associates, that counts for 120 hours. So if you have that down, you've already got the hours you need. We only count, though, the initial CDA. So if you have a renewal CDA, unfortunately, we can't count those hours. We can only count the initial CDA for those 120 hours. So that is a good question. And if you haven't gotten your CDA, that's something that you might want to consider getting, because that would help you a ton with getting some hours. And let me just go back 1 slide to the slide we skipped. So CEUs stand for Continuing Education Units. So if you don't want to go back to school to get a degree, or if you don't have a degree, you don't want to go to college because it's just money or time or whatever, there are other ways that you can get continuing education units or CEUs. And there's a lot of pages online where you can take online trainings. There are classes in the community that you can take that will give you continuing education units. If you take a CEU class that's under 2 hours, these are exempt from the 2-hour workshop limit of 28 hours. You can submit as many 1-hour CEUs, as many 2-hour CEUs as you want to help total your hours. I just want to give you a quick little math tip. When you're working with CEUs, remember that they stand for Continuing Education Units. So sometimes providers get confused when they get a certificate and it shows this, or they see a point system when they're talking about that, that's because CEUs come from accredited institutions and they're giving you units. They're not giving you hours, they're giving you units. And so when they say you've received 0.01 units, that translates back to 1 hour. If they tell you you got 1 unit, that equals out to 10 CEU hours, so 10 hours. What's really helpful on these certificates, if you take a course and they give you a certificate, it'll almost always say, this class you received 1 CEU, one continuing education unit, or 10 CEU hours, 10 training hours. It'll almost always translate it for you. But if for some reason, if your certificate doesn't translate and you're confused and you're not sure how much it really is, you can submit it to NAFCC and we'll let you know how much it is. But it's usually pretty clear how much it's worth and it'll translate it for you so you don't get confused. Okay, got a couple questions coming in. Oh, Tanya's just saying she didn't get it either. Yeah, check after this webinar. I know that sometimes they go in late. It's not something that I send out, it's just the GoToWebinar sends it out automatically. So if you don't get it by tonight, send me an email tomorrow morning and I'll get you your certificates. Roma, oh wait, let me think. I just want to make sure I didn't skip any questions. Okay, Natasha says, do college courses expire? So college courses, they have to be done within the 3-year time frame. The degrees do not. But college courses, yes. And that's why they're worth so many hours, because you're getting fresh new information from your school and you're dedicating a lot of time to those college courses, but just make sure that they're under 3 hours. So if you, for example, if you got a degree within these last few years, you could submit your degree, you would get the hours for the degree, and then any classes that you took within the past 3 years will also count all those classes that you just took within the past 3 years. So that would be a lot of hours. For example, Natasha, if you've taken college courses recently, but if it's been a while since you've taken college courses, then no, we wouldn't be able to count them unless they're younger than 3 years. Roma says, how can my state in Georgia accept this training from NAFCC? I think she asked that question earlier, not sure. Okay, so when you receive a certificate after this webinar, it's usually the next day or 2 days later, you get that certificate in the email. You can either give your state, so Georgia, give your state the email or the certificate that we provide. I know most states will actually require a certificate. So if you're needing more certification than what we provided in that email, then you can always email me and say, hey, I need a certificate that has the NAFCC logo or whatever, and I'm always willing to send you those certificates. Teresa asks, you can also earn them if you belong to your local child care association. Yes, yep. If you have a local child care association, or if you have a, what do they call it, a professional registry in your state, that's a great way to get lots of hours. Shantae says, how many hours would you get for a renewal CDA? You do not get any hours for a renewal CDA, unfortunately. But if the classes, if you have a transcript of the classes you took to get that CDA, we can count those classes that you took, but the CDA itself, we cannot count for any additional hours. Alicia's asking, how can I go back to the beginning of the webinar? There will be a recording of this webinar by tomorrow after I log off of the webinar. It'll save, and then the next day I usually post it on Facebook and to our YouTube page, so you can watch it afterwards. Vivian asks, I missed yesterday's webinar. Will you be repeating these sessions at another time? Yes. So this webinar, we do have a webinar series that goes, one that goes through self-study, one that goes through the application, which you're at tonight, one that goes through the observation visit, and one that goes through the update. Those 4 webinars are presented bi-monthly, so every 2 months. And then we have the Q&A self-study, that's every month. And then we have another webinar, which is the standards webinar, which is also every month. So you can visit our accreditation webinar website, and you can register for as many trainings as you want there. And yes, they do repeat. So if you missed it, yesterday was the Q&A, so that one's every month. So beginning of next month, you can take the next one, or you can find a recording online. Knowles asks, so to get the required 4.5 CU hours for re-accreditation, you could take 5 Tom Copeland webinars and that would meet the required 4.5 hours. No, Tom Copeland webinars, yes, you get CEUs, but that would only be 1 hour. So you would be getting for 5 Tom Copeland webinars, you would get 5 hours. So you would still need 40 more hours. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, that's a great question. Tom Copeland webinars are CEUs because they're authorized through Auburn University, so you can get that. Kathy asked, do NAFCC keep a record of trainings of individual? So yes, when you submit your application, you submit your training hours, we keep a log of how many hours you've accumulated, and then when you submit your update, we keep a track of how many hours you've accumulated. So yes, we won't have all the specific names of them, but we do keep track of the number of hours you've submitted. Anna May asked, Better Kid Care in Pennsylvania is very good source for on-demand training. They cover several states. Awesome. So if anyone's looking for training, try Better Kid Care. Thank you for that resource. Wafa says, if I just got my CDA, does that mean I'm good to go? Yeah, if you just got your initial CDA, then that means you got the 120 hours you need. Just make sure that you submit your application within these next 3 years. That way you can count your CDA. Oh, and then I just missed the second part of Anna's message. She says that Better Kid Care has lots of good topics and lots of trainings. So check that resource out if anyone's looking for hours. Judy's saying she also didn't receive the certificate. I'll have to check on that. But yeah, definitely check after this webinar. If you didn't get it, then send me an email. But usually it's out by now. So I might have to check on that. Alrighty, so let's continue on with the PowerPoint. Let me take off my doodles. Okay, so we've talked about all the different types of trainings. Now, when you're ready to submit your application, you need to go ahead and record it. So, for example, we have here on the training record all the topics that we just talked about here. And then you'll put the title of the training here. You'll mark which one it's on. And you'll just do that to list all of your trainings. And then behind the training record, you'll attach all transcripts or certificates. If you write it here but don't submit a transcript or certificate, we can't count it because we don't have proof that you actually did it. This might be sad to hear, but sometimes providers do that. They'll write something here and then they don't submit a certificate because they just need a few more hours or something. But we do double check and make sure that you really do have the 120 hours or the 90 hours you need. So don't try to pull a fast one on us. We do check. So make sure that this is a good way for you to check and make sure that you have everything that you need to total your 120 or your 90 hours. And then this also helps us to see as well that how you see that you're submitting it, and we can confirm that we see the same as you do. And then there's another page that is provided in your training log to go ahead if you want to write the training and make sure that you have all of the core competencies. There's this page that's really helpful. We don't necessarily need this page. It's good to submit it in so we can double check and make sure, but this is kind of more for you just to make sure that that you've got the balance that you need for your trainings. And then this is just an example page. So they wrote that they had a bachelor's in early child care education, they put the 42-hour degree, moved it here, put all their trainings, and then by the end, they had 120 hours. Okay, I got some more questions coming in. We're almost there, guys. Okay, let's see. Roma asks, why do I have to write in on the NAFCC training log when I can just send my state training transcript in? That's a good question. Go ahead and just submit your state training transcript, and then when you get to this part, you can just write like your registry transcript. You don't need to write every single training out if you don't want to. Just write registry training, and then like, I don't know, the part of this one, it's 30 hours or whatever it is. And so that, just so we know and we're triggered to go look for it, that you've attached it to the back. Natasha says, All Our Kin in Connecticut also has plenty of trainings and support to help you to get your accreditation. Yes, All Our Kin is awesome. If you don't know about All Our Kin, I highly recommend that you learn more about them. They actually won the AFP award at our last conference because they're that awesome. So I would definitely recommend them as well. Let's see, Kathy says, Pennsylvania Keys trainings, are they valid? Yes, as long as you have a transcript from them. Yes, you can submit those hours. Anna Mae says, when will this be a fill-in and the application, so does it not need to be handwritten? So we do on our website have an online version of this. I just show the paper version just because it's a little bit easier to see. But yes, we do have an application online that you can fill it in online. I will pop out of the presentation as soon as I'm done. I've only got a few more slides left, and I can show you how to find that, Anna, in just a minute. But yes, we do have it available online. Tanya says, military care providers sign a monthly log of training. Can we just send a copy of that? Yes, Tanya, you can send in. Anyone who's in the military, you can send in your monthly training logs, and we will count those. And yes, you can submit that instead of the training log, or if you want to submit the NAFCC training log still and just mention that that's what you're attaching, that's fine as well. If that ends up being the only thing that you're submitting because the military does have so many hours, then yeah, you really only need to submit that. Judy says, what if all of your training is on your registry? Okay, yeah, so a lot of these questions are just asking if you have a registry and they're all going to be on that registry, then yeah, just go ahead and submit the registry. We want this log to be more of a tool than a hindrance to you. So if it's going to be a hindrance to you, don't use it. Just submit your registry. But if you've got a gazillion certificates that you're going to be submitting, you really do want to fill out this training record. And yes, Roman, but you still do have to submit the copy of your certificate, because anyone can say, oh yeah, I took a nutrition class, but I need the certificate to be able to prove that you actually did take that class on nutrition, like you're writing and said that you did. So yeah, you have to fill out the training record, and you have to fill out, and you have to submit your certificates or your transcripts. But if you're just going to be submitting your state registry, then yeah, just submit the state registry because it's all there organized on the log for you already. Okay, got lots of questions. Yes, Packy says the transcript. Who did you recommend? I did not get the name. Oh, All Our Kin. All Our Kin. K is K-I-N. All Our Kin. Wafa says, how many hours all total should I have? So Wafa, I think you said that you're a first-time accrediting provider, so you need 120 hours. And because you said you just did your CDA, that would complete your 120 hours. And then Wafa, yes, your state training will count. Just submit your transcript or your training log that they give you to prove that you took those classes. Alrighty, I think I caught up on all my questions about training. If you have more, go ahead and, oh, I got another one. Is the CACFP training valid for nutrition? Yeah, if you have your certificate to send that in that proves your hours, then yes, you can use that. Okay, so now let's just do a quick review. Let me grab my pen. We've talked about the application. We talked about the application fee. We talked about membership, making sure you have that. We talked about provider and co-provider fees. We've talked about submitting your license and giving us licensing consent. We've talked about the health assessment, TB screening, first aid, CPR, state federal background checks, and we just finished talking about training. So now that you have all of this done, you're ready to submit your application. So there are a couple ways you can go ahead and submit your application. You can submit by mail to our office. You can scan it to us and email it to accreditation@nafcc.org, or you can fax it to 801-886-2325. I highly recommend that you scan or fax it. Mailmen are awesome, but sometimes mail gets lost. And it also takes a little bit longer, but if you scan it or fax it, then we let you know within the next business day at least that we have received it. I check the accreditation email every day, and I keep it updated and email you guys every day to let you know that I've received your submission. Please, 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 if you decide to email or scan, submit a PDF of your documents Sometimes I get providers who send me over 100 pictures, and it's really hard to get your application together when you submit a lot of pictures. So make sure that you have it all in one PDF file or 2 or 3 PDF files if it's really big, if that's how you choose to submit. Or the other way to submit is by doing it online through our online application, which I'll also show you in just a minute. And processing time takes about 3 or 5 weeks. I know Fernanda is usually pretty fast and she can usually get it done a lot faster, but just know that processing time is usually between 3 to 5 weeks once you've submitted your application, and that is if your application is complete at the time of submission. If you submit an application, there's something missing, Fernanda or whoever's reviewing it will get in contact with you to let you know what's missing, and then once you've got all your missing documents and your whole application is complete, then it'll be time for us to find an observer for you. Alrighty, so that is most of the information that I have to share with you tonight. So I just want to see if there are any other lingering questions, answer those for you. I'll pull out of the presentation for just a minute to show you how to access the online application if that's something you're more interested in. And for those of you who don't want to stick around and need to head out to be with family or whatever you need, here's our contact information that I'll talk about quickly, and then I'll get to the rest of the questions. These are the members of the accreditation team. Alicia Platt is our operations manager. Fernanda, she works on applications and update submissions. Marissa Gallegos is me. I do a lot of provider engagement. I do these webinars. I talk to you guys on Facebook and things like that, and then work on other projects. And then Shireen works on observations. So if you are needing any information in those specific fields or just have general questions, you can reach out to any one of us or reach out to the accreditation@nafcc.org email. And then if you're needing extra help or wanting to find more community, we do have a few Facebook pages for those who are going through accreditation for the first time. We have the NAFCC Accreditation Candidates in Process page. For those who are currently accredited and have already received their accreditation, we have the NAFCC Accredited Providers page. If you happen to be an observer, we have an NAFCC Observer page. And if you're a group that helps mentor or helps those to receive their accreditation, like All Our Kin, then you can be part of the Accreditation Facilitation Projects page. But most of you are probably falling in the category of the Accreditation Candidates in Process or the Accredited Provider page. So thank you so much for attending. I'll stick around just a little bit longer to answer all your questions and show you the online application. But for those of you who have to leave, I understand. Thank you so much for attending. And you will have your certificate by the latest tomorrow evening or maybe Saturday morning. It sounds like last night's webinar, they're taking a little bit longer than usual to get out to you. So do know that you'll be receiving an email with your certificate for attending tonight. And because we did run a little bit longer tonight, longer than an hour, I'll go ahead and award everybody an hour and a half instead of just the hour for tonight. So you got an extra half an hour of training. Awesome. Okay, going through the questions now. I sent my application to scholarship sponsor. Will they forward it all to you, Shante? It depends. Usually, yes. Usually, if you submit it to them, they'll send it directly to us, but just double check on that with them. I know it depends. Do you know who your scholarship sponsor is? And I could probably tell you, but usually they will, but sometimes they won't, so just double check with them if you're submitting it to them. Roma's asking, do we have an accreditation store back? Yes, I do not know too much about the Fontiva store. That is a membership benefit, so you'd want to talk to our membership team, and they can walk you through that. I unfortunately don't know much about that, but yes, I know that it is available, so you can do those purchases online. Yes, so I would contact our membership team. So if you just call our main office line, you'll reach the membership team. Oh, Anna May says, thank you to Roma for your suggestions. That helped her a lot. So thank you, Roma. And thank you, Anna. Oh, Shante says that the certificates from last night are showing up now. Great. Yeah, I know sometimes they take a little bit longer. Okay, so I think I hit all the questions. I want to go ahead and come out of the webinar for just a second so I can show you some things on our website that you were asking about. So if you come to nafcc.org, oh, Shante, INAYC, yes, they will submit it to me I have a good buddy there. Yeah, she always sends it to me. So once she submits it to me, then I always send you an email letting you know that I got it. So if you submitted it recently and you don't hear anything back in a few weeks or like in a week or two, then reach out to me because she's pretty fast about getting those out to me as soon as you get it to them. Okay, so here on our website, if you are wanting to do the application online because you don't want to submit a gazillion papers, I totally understand. So if you come to NAFCC and then you go to accreditation and go down 1, 2, 3 tabs here to achieving and maintaining your accreditation, click on here, and then under this resource column, I'll get my pen. Under this resource column, there is the Accreditation Application Online. If you click on this one that just says Accreditation Application, it will bring up the application, the paper application that I was just showing you. So we just went all through all of that. That's what it will pop up. But if you go to the Accreditation Application Online, then it will have an electronic form of everything we just talked about. So you can fill it all out online if you prefer to do it that way. It's 14 pages long. The only thing that I will warn you about is just make sure that you do this in 1 or 2 sittings. Sometimes this form doesn't exist for very long. So if you like want to save it and then come back a few days later, it doesn't save very well. So make sure that when you're ready to fill it out and you want to do it online, that you just do it all in one sitting and get it done. Otherwise, sometimes it gets lost and then you get frustrated because you worked a long time on it and then it doesn't save. So do it all in one sitting, and you can attach all your documents to this as well. So that's a great tool if you prefer to do it that way. The other question I had was about webinars. Oh, also on this page before I leave, on this page, if you're needing extra documents, here's where you can get the application, here's where you can get the health assessment form, the TB screening, the training log, more information about background checks, and then here's the calendar that I was telling you about, so you know when to submit your application. So this page has lots of good information. And then for those of you who are asking about the webinars, if you go to accreditation again and go back down 3 steps to the achieving and maintaining accreditation, go to the right 1, 2, you have the accreditation webinars right here. And this has all the accreditation webinars. So we have the Getting Started with an NAFCC Q&A, which is monthly. You can register for that. We have the 4-part webinar series. You're in part 2 right now, talking about the application. These are bi-monthly, so we present these we present this series every 2 months. You can, starting at the beginning of the 2 months, you can get part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4 in. And then if you're wanting to know more about the most fit standards and observation visit, that's also a webinar that we present monthly. So that's a great way to get training hours if you're looking for more hours. We also have just our regular webinar page, which are the professional development webinars. And these ones are usually the CEU ones. So if you're looking for CEU hours, this is where you can get these ones. These are mostly Tom Copeland webinars. Sometimes we have Sesame Street come and do webinars, and other groups do that. So you can check out this page for more information about, or for more options, training options that can give you CEUs. Alrighty, I'm going to go back to the presentation so you can have our contact information again. But if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar for tonight. Thank you again so much for attending, for asking your questions, and please let us know how you're liking the webinars, if it's something you like. If there's more information that you need, feel free to reach out to me or to anyone on the accreditation team at any time. So I'll just wait around 1 more minute, see if there are any other lingering questions. And then if not, I'll go ahead and close the webinar for tonight, and expect to see your certificate in your email by tomorrow evening. You're welcome, Kathy. You're welcome, Roma. I'm glad that you all enjoyed it. You're welcome, Natasha. You're welcome, Vivian. Alrighty, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar tonight. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you, WAPA, and have a great night.